Recording in progress.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
You want, or you can just tell me to do it.
All right, Jerry, you guys ready?
Do better.
All right. All right, welcome everybody. I'm not sure if everybody's met James Ulster here. Sharon?
No, I haven't. Hey, James, I'm Sharon Muir.
James, Scott, when are you cycling? What's our timing? You know? Are you still going to be with us in James?
As far as I know,
we get both of you guys?
we're both with this group long term, as far as I know.
Excellent.
You're shaking me up there, Ben. I'm not ready to.
How hard did you have to negotiate?
It's pretty hard. Fortunately, I have a supportive boss. Been asking for more feet on the ground for this for years.
You're spending most of your time on visits.
James is
Proposals,
yeah.
And that's been the majority of my time. And then we're doing comprehensive plan stuff and other sort of teams with our community development group, but this is my focus. So.
And I've been saying this repeatedly, I know, but sometime soon I hope to have a part-time monitoring person as well. But I didn't really even have time to start working on that until James got here. But hopefully that'll happen in the next few months.
Did we cycle through monitoring all systems?
We have done very little on the ground monitoring before a few months ago because we lost all of our monitoring interns. That's not the way to put that, Scott. Our monitoring interns were unable to work during the worst of COVID, so we didn't have any on the ground people. For a while there, Chess was doing quite a bit of it until he retired. Since he retired, we've done very little on the ground monitoring, even though we've still been doing our remote monitoring. Now that James is here, part of his training has been to dive into a lot of the monitoring, which he's doing. And then again, we'll have another person as James gets busy with other things he needs to work on, like Ag4 districts. Hopefully we'll have another person doing 20, 30 hours a week of monitoring. That's the hope.
Great. Are there any other matters? Public. Is there any public?
Public.
Hello, public. Anybody out there in the ecosphere?
So.
How often was the county updates aerial?
I can't answer that.
The last one
we
that's
got
on
was
there is 2018.
No, but internally they have greater access, but so I want to say October, December 2022.
Really?
So I don't know.
They put it on for everybody else.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
Because I think it's a subscription to a satellite source.
It's a couple of different sources.
Yeah.
The 2018 ones were state provided, so we've got a license to share those to anybody. 2021, 2022 ones are through Pictometry, which is a private company, and we have a license to view those, and you all have often seen them in presentations here. They're oblique aerials a lot, but we don't have a license to share those out to the public.
Can you use those for first order monitoring?
We could. They're not all that frequent. They're, at most once a year, but yeah, we could.
The last one was
October or December.
I mean, if there's somebody's cutting grass, bounce the trees down, or building a fish pond, a road up to the pinnacle, we would see that.
There's also an automated service that you can subscribe to. It will show the same, right? So you give them the flag coordinates, and it will automatically flag.
I don't think we currently have funding for anything like that, but
It's
it
not
would be useful.
it's not expensive. Use it.
Things we do aren't expensive. Funding.
Well, then, no, no, it's almost.
I would be happy to look.
No, it's not expensive. So, yeah, like I said, 2021 here, 2022 here. Sure, everything's different. The differences. There's gotta happen.
Yeah, you could do the sequence, which is what we've not had a lot of in the past.
Alright, I'm assuming we'll have a chance to look over last month's minutes, comments, minutes, suggestions, motion approved.
Move approval.
All in favor? Very minded. Alright. Moving on to. Correct.
That's correct.
Calhoun?
Caldejon.
Right.
Sorry. Not sure why that's in there. I apologize.
So this is my big debut here for my presentation. Serve at your pleasure, so if you need to move along faster or whatever we need to do, I've got some images and stuff I want to share with you, but this is out in Crozet, the gentleman, Randy Caldejon, I guess purchased this property probably 8 years ago. The two parcels in front on Jarman's Gap, he's intending on put under easement. And he resides in the back, which you'll see on some of these images, but on the, we're checking all the boxes here with regard to our minimum standards, I think. There's no development rights for those larger parcels, just how the property was dissected since the 79 tax maps. But he has some larger tracts available for dwellings, but we would be eliminating 3 potential parcels. To orient you a bit to where we're located here, the yellow is the Licking Hole Creek drainage area at the property, and the Licking Hole Creek goes bisects between Route 240 and 250, if you're familiar with that, and then it intersects with the Meacham's River down at the 240, 250 interchange there. And of course, then it goes to meet the Mormons and then form the South Fork. So we're considering that as valuable as far as the drinking water supply. Yeah, I've listed here on the right, the drainage area to the property is 3.7 miles. And the elevation at the top there near the Skyline Drive is 3,000 feet and goes down to 800 where we're located. Here's some of my mapping for the property. So I'll orient you a bit to where we are. The 2 parcels in the front, they're divided in the middle there by an access to the rear where the gentleman currently lives. If you look to the top right, the vicinity map, the green shows you some of the adjoining conservation easements. So, and also on the larger map there to the right, that's King Family Vineyards, Roseland Farm. Again, on the inset map, there's King Family has probably some 300 acres, and then there's other easements. Monterey Farm is another couple hundred, and up above, across Jarman's Gap to the left is a 29-acre easement that we hold. So you can see that the Licking Hole Creek comes into the property there on the northern boundary, kind of in the middle. And you see the mapped area of 100-year floodplain. The boundary to the south there is an intermittent stream, where you see the pond there on the bottom. And there, just north of the pond is an existing building. That's the only building on the property right now. But I'm also showing some proposed buffers around Licking Hole Creek, as well as the intermittent stream. And the National Wetland Inventory has a small little wetland mapped above the pond there, which we would want to protect, I think. So some of the mapping from 1875 on the top there, you don't see crozet existing at all there. But what Licking Hole Creek shoots up into the mountain and is where it creates a Jarman's Gap. So that's where the 3-notched road runs and comes right past this property. And I understand there's some interest in recognizing the importance of the 3-notch road. And I did a lot of sort of history up on that, which I won't share with you, but it's pretty fascinating. I've got my notes here. So the thing I want to share with you on the maps in general is the sort of the landscape position. So it's pretty steep coming down into the valley, and we're just, again, south of these railroad tracks. If you're remembering Yonder Hill Farms from last month, it's right adjacent to those railroad tracks. But wanted to comment a bit on the soil in that regard. I think Scott cautioned me and my wife cautioned me that since I'm a soil scientist, I shouldn't spend 20 minutes on the soil. But I thought I'd share a bit about the prime farmland soils. If you look to the top along Licking Hole Creek is the 17 type of soil. That's Craigsville, as well as on the intermittent stream at the bottom. And those are considered to be frequently flooded, so they are not prime. But the higher ground is considered foot slopes and toe slopes at the base of these mountains, where they have a lot of cobble material. That doesn't make it suitable for farming, but there is 10 inches of topsoil and then 20 inches of clay before you get to the cobble. So that is like very desirable for our farming, because once you get some root penetration into that topsoil and things dry out in August, they are able to tap down into that clay soil deeper down. And this is, I guess, more of the type of map you're used to seeing. The area around the pond is sort of a wetter soil. Then the grayer color is that prime soil on that higher ground, and then the yellow is that frequently flooded soil. But it's still decent. I want to try something for your viewing pleasure here, if you'll bear with me. This is a drone image I took, and it's a little wobbly, so if you have motion sickness, I would just not stare at it too closely. But this is coming off the entrance at Jarman's Gap. It's a minute long, if you'll bear with me. But the road is paved here for the first couple hundred feet, and then it's gravel. But you'll see some of this wetland here in the floodplain, which I'm hoping to be protected. You'll see then the more mature trees are surrounding the main body of Licking Hole Creek. You'll see the fence lines, there's livestock there that he's renting currently to King Family Vineyard. That's they're polo ponies. So he's got winter wheat planted there, and I guess has somebody who comes and cuts that for him. And we sort of passed that event barn, but I'll show you another image of that. This is the intermittent stream looking to the east towards King Family. That's the property line. To the left is our easement. To the right is off the property. This structure is listed in the county GIS as an event structure. So I inquired to him as to events. He said this is more sort of a family thing, and maybe have a nonprofit. It's, sort of a nice little spot there, but he'd also,
This is on the property that we're considering.
that is correct. He said at some point he may want to convert that to a dwelling. And that's why we're not speculating as to dwelling or not dwelling. We're saying, yeah, that's going to be a dwelling as far as the numbers of development or dwelling units. We're saying that's inclusive. All right, so that's, again, looking to the west, that's your little event barn.
Where is the dwelling? Correct.
There's no dwelling on this property, but he resides on this frame to the left. That road continues on to his main house, which I think I'll have some image of that.
Just go back. He's not living on this property.
So is that his house way over there on the left?
No, it's up to-
If you don't mind, on this image, the very southernmost part is his enclave of homes and barns and so forth. So that's his current residence.
Below what, the lake or whatever?
Correct. Below the lake, those are his current residence, and that's not under contemplation for this easement at all. He's growing some grapes on his place and doing some other things.
You showed us the paved road,
Yes.
and I had pulled up a survey and said that is private access easement, and that is paved, and that is the way he gets to his current residence in the back.
That is correct. And I gathered that the survey applied as well. So we're conscious of that. It's not, like I said, paved all the way back, but I mean, there's varying things on the plats. One says a 40-foot variable width right away, one says 50-foot variable width. I'm wondering if he owns all the property, do you actually give an easement to yourself? I mean, that's sort of a property law question, but
It's something we need to straighten out because that access, which is shown on these plats as an easement, is actually shown as a portion of that rear parcel on the tax maps. So that's something we still need to get straight before we have final wording on this, because
How much property does he have adjacent to?
the two in front are 95 and he's got another 95 that he resides on.
And those are some,
they're all right.
Is it titled in his name? Is it titled in the same name?
It's under Fidelis Farm LLC, I believe.
All of it is?
I believe all of it is.
They've changed names a couple of different times, and they've shifted it with gifted deeds, so you have to kind of follow the LS.
Yeah, that's true.
And
That's
get
true.
down to the individuals, yeah.
I thought they were different names. I remember looking to see if he owned
It's been like,
other property in the
it's been
area.
like
and I
3
didn't
different
find that
names.
name.
is he aware of our typical restrictions on events?
Yes. In fact, I was curious, the fact that he's adjacent to King Family, and King Family is under conservation easement with VOF. And you look historically at that event building, it's kind of growing and more parking and stuff. And I wanted to make sure he wasn't of the idea that was kind of how we rolled on. And yeah, so it said that, and it should be memorialized in all the documentation, what the uses are, but that shook me up a bit when I first saw it,
Yeah.
event structure. So
So it was a little confusing because it looks like he bought it like in 2017 and he built that in 2017.
it's new, and I think there was a former
So
old
he
aerial
would've put
photos
in an
show.
event, or they would have given him that designation, I guess, or he had a purpose when he built it.
What's it used for now?
He says it just has family functions there. So,
We should keep it that way.
But, worried about another competing development venue or something. What event building, does that just mean it doesn't have all the checks for a residence?
It's not-
That's That's all.
line, you know, it's heated space probably, living room, kitchen.
You don't think? Does it have a kitchen?
I don't know, and
I mean, a vent,
I would
That
I'd imagine it has
doesn't mean they'd have
some
a
sewage
kitchen.
disposal capability.
Well, this, if you, has he seen our drafting?
Can you refresh us on what exactly the limitations are in these easements for event space, for event buildings?
Do you have a
I can
comment?
pull up the template.
Maybe Richie knows off the top of his head.
Well, you know, it always comes down to, is it commercial or is it non-commercial? I presume your concern is commercial, commercial type events. And the problem is that you get into agricultural uses and whether the event that they put on in this farm falls under an agricultural event. So then that's permitted. Other commercial events, as long as they're de minimis, they would be permitted. And then of course, I don't know how big the building, if you can do it all within the building, then that becomes permitted too. So, I mean, my opinion in terms of our restrictions on commercial uses of this sort is that they're not terribly restricted. So,
they don't charge us to go to polo matches, they do sell us wine.
I don't think the King family arrangement should be taken as precedent for this.
Agreed. And I don't think there was any intent.
I don't know if it's a little bit as an equine event, it may be an equine activity, so it's, you know.
Well, we have greater latitude in that regard, at least we historically assume that we have greater latitude to restrict. This came up in scale over the Fox field. But we insisted on very specific language about number of events, type of events, so we have a description that applied in one circumstance that easily applied to another. Small
This is the template. There is a prior approval step in that. Nothing would become automatically possible just because there's something called an event structure there.
But we don't
It's a
know what
fancy word.
small scale commercial means.
Well,
Yeah,
I
that
think it's
puts,
because it
small
has to-
scale kind of puts you in a bit of a hot seat, I guess.
and the incidental, it's between small scale and incidental to
Yeah.
the permitted activities kind of pushes that pretty small. But again, even with, since there's a prior written approval required there, it's not like somebody who happens to have a building like this and their reason can just legally jump directly into doing commercial events. There's,
We see subsection A.
I mean, frankly, the building's there, the parking's there. How much do we
D
really
allows
care?
activities within the building.
What, Rich?
Subsection D allows activities other than A and B
Okay.
conducted within
Yeah,
the
okay.
building. I don't know how big the building is, I don't think it's 10,000 square feet.
It's 15.
it's too nice a building for livestock processing and it's too small a building for a big wedding.
But at minimum, I think we would want a restriction that that building would not be enlarged. The parking would not be excessive. And we would want further definition of commercial activity not to include renting alcohol for weddings.
Yep, I think that's easy enough to do. The only complication I would point out there is in the part of the proposal where we pointed out that it could be converted to a dwelling. We gave it an extra like 500 square feet or something of additional space.
Yeah.
How big is it now?
1,500.
1,500 square feet?
18. looks
And we're
like
worried?
Well, it says there are two buildings, there's an event building for 1512 and an event building for 300.
No, it's actually the same building. The 300 is a loft. The 300 is just the loft above.
Looked a little bigger than that.
Says it could be converted as a footprint, converted or used as a dwelling, about 10,000 square feet.
Which was just to allow a little extra space for
Yeah.
necessary items. if it was converted.
And they're not asking for a 7,500 square foot lot. Yeah.
Is that the only in principal house permitted?
Because they've got a separate dwelling property back behind that they live on, so.
Yeah, but that might not always be like that.
But
Yeah, I
I
just
think
think-
that's why they're, that's why I'm saying, that's why they're willing to do that. I grant you it's unusual.
Yeah,
that-
I mean, it strikes me as a little restrictive and that we may have problems with it in the future.
Right, I'm comfortable with the language today becoming a commercial event space, but I agree with Sherry that it's almost too restricted. But if they're fine with it.
I mean, I think especially if you start limiting the uses, in other words, things like you can't get an ABC license or, something like that, that you're just setting yourself up long-term for stewardship problems. The building's there. And I just don't want to see us getting into minutia about what's going on, with a building that the people come, they have an event or whatever they do for the 4-H or the Ruritans or whatever it is. It may or may not be related to something else they're doing on the farm. To what degree do we care? The people come, they go home.
I think we
Building's
do
still
care
there.
once it becomes actually commercial, if it's family or if it's nonprofit, and
I
it
don't
fits the
know.
scale.
My
then
house
you care. But that said, I think we can easily adapt what Jeff said about specifying that there won't be commercial events in that space without being as restrictive as saying you can't have an EPC license. I don't think we would need to go into that kind of detail.
So you're gonna say no commercial?
That was what Chip suggested, and I think it's an easy enough addition. I mean, I think effectively we're already there, or at least it's so limited that
Yeah.
you'd have to have prior written approval. We can talk to the landowners and say, there's concern about an event structure. We'd like to just specify that that can't be
For
commercial.
them to be coming to us and asking that sort of.
This is just the template. This is where we start from.
Yeah.
Are they using the property for agriculture at this point?
Well, they're hay.
He
Raising
has somebody
cornrows and hay.
planting wheat currently, but he has grapes on his property and.
Yeah, but on this property.
No, it's
Just
grazing the
grazing.
horses, he's renting that out to the.
And he's doing hay. He's right.
That's agriculture.
Well, doesn't the county have some other mechanism to control big events like hours and number of people
Oh,
and
we do the zoning ordinance,
VDOT
but
entrances and all? I mean,
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
yeah,
rural area zoning, isn't that?
you can only do
It
so
does,
much.
but rural area zoning is not permanent like conservation is.
So,
No.
My point is if he's conducting agriculture on the property, he's gonna be able to squeeze in some events, not huge events, but he's gonna be allowed to.
If he's got an ag use that lends itself, which I don't think he currently does, but could, I mean, especially thinking out in that part of the county, if he were to plant the property as an orchard, I'm sure you could have fruit related events or something. So there's-
Richard, I have no problem with our garden concept. My concern would be that he owns adjacent property, that this property venue for whatever goes to the other, which we've seen over and over again. So that this restriction for this property is perfectly fine. If he wants to have a farm stand in the event space, let him have a farm stand. That's not the issue. But if he were to enlarge that to a 15,000 square foot and have something going on next door to it, then that would not be consistent with conservation.
On the property to itself.
Yes. No. I see. If he were to extend the current building to 10 times its current size and make it a party barn that he leased out, that would not be a conservation.
But this limits it 3,000.
Yes, so that limitation on space, plus this language is perfect.
Do we need to concern ourselves about easement issues?
About what?
The benefit he's gonna get to the adjacent property?
I thought about that and I think that's
That's the
a tax
appraisal.
issue.
Yeah,
That's the appraisal.
right.
I mean, it's an
You know,
appraising
allow the
issue,
appraisal,
you know,
and
it's,
then it'll affect the value of the donation.
One thing that helped me was that survey. and we split it into 3 parcels. So we call it parcels 1, 2, and 3 or ABC. The one in the back larger one, it pertains to development rights. And then the 2 that we're talking about, B and C, neither one of them have development rights, but they can be divided 21 acres or greater. So he's kind of positioned this, that the big thing is to development rights. The road to get to the back property is some sort of easement that runs between these 2 parcels. So I'm just piecing it all together. I think we'll get some conservation and positives out of it, because we might have one house on, 45 to 50 acre parcel at some point in the future. But you only have 4, and he still has the right to do what he wants to do on the back.
It seems like the width of that road appears to be 40 feet to 50 feet, that would mean that development of that back parcel.
It's 50 feet.
Right,
It's in state
but
road.
it's a 40.
This is variable, it's kind of.
Right. Yeah. And Scott, you said that's one of the things you guys need to look out.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm not sure why it says easement on the plats when it appears everywhere else to be 3 separate parcels. That just
Okay.
needs to
It
be.
says a new 50-foot and variable with private access easement as well on the survey.
It sounds like he's planning,
South of this, is that the development?
yeah. But putting all the pieces together, that's why it would be easement owned by the same owner. Where they could be confusion.
Well, they've got a business in kind of ag technology that I think they operate out of their home or something. I don't remember the exact, it might mix this up.
No, that's correct.
So that may have something to do why they're not thinking about doing an easement on the southern portions, because they're concerned about they're going to be operating at least, effectively the office of that commercial use, which is monitoring technology.
Yeah, he's doing
Technology or something.
remote disease monitoring and spraying and remote sensing of grapes and vineyards, and he's trying to sell, he's got a patent on some robotic thing that he's running through the
We have a
vineyards.
restriction on these businesses.
Yeah, typically we allow commercial uses that can fit within the permitted structures. I think is the way it's phrased. Can and do occur within the permitted structures.
But you've got a deeded access road to the back tract.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a
Well,
recorded deed.
it shows on the plats as an easement, but it shows on our tax maps as a pipe stem.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why
Yeah,
it's
it
not
shows
totally
it's
clear
part
on
of that's
what's
part
going
of
on
the
there.
parcel.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you can see right there on the plat, it says on the one on the left, new 50-foot and variable width private access easement, but it's also showing parcel boundaries. And you've got 3 parcels. So I don't really understand that plat.
The plat on the right, the lower left parcel is a boundary line adjustment to add that to the larger parcel to the right. And that has that same easement indicated, but it says 40 foot on the bottom title heading.
But again, it has boundaries.
The total acreage of the land to go under easement is 95,
95.
okay.
45 and 50 that meet Travis Gap Road.
But you're gonna combine those parcels so that you have one block of 95 only, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it says in the proposal.
Can you actually combine the parcels?
We can't
By
force you
deed-
to do
by
that, but the deed
consolidation.
would effectively treat them as one, just like it would for any other multi-parcel easement that says shall be conveyed as a single.
Could you
Yeah.
summarize what the components are here? You said no additional dwellings.
Treating the debt farm as a potential development. So it will allow us.
A max footprint of 2,000 square feet. You could expand to that, it's currently 1,500. If you get a 500, if you're
It's
in-
1,500 plus a small
Footprint is
loft.
the above ground square footage.
So no additional structures.
No additional dwellings other than that barn. There could be farm structures.
An accessory structure.
That's what you see, where our template says.
No. I think it says something more like subordinate to.
Yeah.
Rather than giving sizes anymore.
What about envelopes?
We have not talked to them about envelopes that I know of, and I don't know if they're working with an attorney
For
yet.
other structures, for farm structures. Some ordinance.
But let's say that in terms of the barn and if they use it as a dwelling, speaks to its replacement, I assume that would be on the same site. I don't know. Conversion would have to be the same site, but if you were to remove it and replace it, I think we'd want it in the same site.
With some additional restrictions.
I was assuming, but now when I look at the proposal, it doesn't
It's not
say in the same site. I think practically speaking it is, but it doesn't strictly say that.
Both those envelopes in the direction.
Fishing pole rentals. I was trying to think of something to do with that pond. They can rent fishing. Let's get that in there. No fishing pole rentals.
They stock per pound?
Huh?
If they stock and sell it per pound?
Do you wish this to be approved today?
We were recommending it for approval, but if there are more issues you all want to work out, we can certainly bring it back next month.
It just needs a little tweaking.
I think we're looking for problems. Right?
Yeah.
To me, it looks pretty, if you limit it to that square footage, in fact, the footprint stays the same. You had converting some loft, and that footprint's pretty small, limited to anything you ever want to do. I mean, if you're worried about what he does on the other structure, is that something we do? We think
Yeah,
about it.
it's scenically, just looking at that. It'd be great if we extinguishing the overlays. Pressure's on. Pressure's on out there, and it's on just the visibility of those two parts. This house is existing structures.
What are you gonna put in the blank for farm buildings exceeding blank square feet?
Something I realized just now, way too late, that we should have specified that in the proposal because we used to have a set number in the template and we don't anymore. So this property at 95 looks like it would be the 4,500, which used to be our default.
Right.
Yeah. But those farm buildings and structures be also later converted into event space?
They could convert the space, but they would still need the approval of this body, that a written approval of this body to carry out the events. And we would need to make a finding, you all need to make a finding that it was incidental to an ag use or another permitted commercial use. So it couldn't be a primary use.
It seems like we would want either envelopes for buildings over a certain size, like 500 square feet or something, or you'd want a pretty deep setback because, as somebody just said, it's quite a visible property.
Well,
And
do
I
we
assume that
want
they've got
setback?
some legal representation.
No, I don't think they do yet. Do we?
No, I indicated we should do some of these steps before they went forward with a lot of appraisals and legal fees. But they I think know the legal community, and they suggested some individuals that they were going to pursue. I think they were using the King family example in some of those sort of those representations. I think he was aware of the Yonder Hill thing going forward, and the little enclave of folks all through there.
It sounds as though we should convey to them that we are willing to accept this with the terms of our usual with the restriction of non-enlarging the existing barn by more than 2,000 square feet, it may be converted to a dwelling. And building envelopes for any future ag buildings.
Might be simpler to do a setback as we've done in several other cases. Sharon, you've advocated before for a setback for structures of 500 square feet or more.
These days, this is why I'm asking about the legal counsel. I don't think we should be taking, Richie, these easements until these people are represented for sure. Because the lack of building envelopes is a red flag to the IRS. And if we're not, I mean, we don't want to be giving tax advice, but we also don't want people who aren't aware of potentially fatal flaws.
This is an odd one in that normally we're doing those building envelopes for future dwellings. And right now, the only future dwelling is that barn. So, and I think we said, maybe it was Jay said to lock that down to its current location. Maybe that should be done as an envelope just to make IRS happy.
Just a quick question, so with the farm buildings and other structures, non-dwelling, are we looking at this as a 45 acre and 50 acre parcel, or are we looking at it as a 90? 95. So he can't say this has to have 2,500 and this one can have 49.
It'll be written in such a way that it always has to be conveyed as a single piece.
Okay, so it will be treated as one parcel.
Sure, in this instance, though, the IRS, particularly the new one, may not be relevant because we're not discussing dwellings. Therefore, it doesn't affect the deductibility of whatever farm buildings.
I think it's completely not nailed down as to whether the IRS intends farm buildings or farm buildings of any size to be included in their new interest in building location.
You have to go back and read them in detail, but I think all the past ones we've done, the envelopes have been applied to dwellings, not to all structures.
To apply to what?
To dwellings, not to everything.
I mean, I think frankly, that's risky. And I don't think we should take that kind of thing until they have representation.
Yeah, there's two different things there.
So you're worried about them building a health structure associated with farming and building it right up next to the road?
Well, if they put a run-in shed up next to the road, that's ag scenery for
Is that
it.
what we're worried about?
But if
You want a setback for those?
what we've been doing
Yeah,
is setbacks for
no,
things
that-
over 500 square feet.
They could put in a 2,000 square foot riding ring.
Yeah, I don't think it's running sheds that people are concerned about. I mean,
That's why we've been allowing 500 and under
yeah, that's
within
right.
those setbacks, right? And the setbacks have been
Yeah,
400
exactly,
500 feet.
exactly.
So to take Sherry's concern, in addition to limitation on the size of the dwelling if it's converting, standard language on commercial use, and a recommendation that they show envelopes for either future structures and that they obtain legal counsel as part of the application.
And we certainly wouldn't have gone past this point without expecting them to have legal counsel. It happens sometimes that landowners come to this point of just doing the proposal and they haven't worked with an attorney yet. Others do.
You can just say to them, though, that there are some recent IRS changes that they may not be aware of, and therefore we recommend strongly that they obtain counsel.
Yeah, we're looking out for their best interests.
Chip, there's one thing you said I want to clarify. You said standard language for commercial. Earlier, I think you had said that you would prefer to see a direct statement that commercial events not be permitted. You think that the default language is okay?
No, the template language, from my perspective, is fine.
Great. Just trying to get the
Along
guidance
with
straight.
the space limitation.
Right.
Without the space limitation, that wouldn't.
All right, so
I might need some help from the board at some point with regard to communicating with potential donors as far as the representation. Because I'm we're not doing tax advice, we're not doing appraisals, and I'm doing the legwork and kind of on, boots on the ground, but I'll advise them, we're not going anywhere without those other pieces, but, I mean, I thought,
They need their team.
if they're testing the waters, I don't know if that's now a big encumbrance on us to get all this together and get your time, and now but I mean, that was the approach, was if it's not gonna fly, maybe they need to know that sooner than later, or am I kind of 90% it's gonna fly, or, so that,
We including a setback?
I was gonna ask that because for Jarman's Gap, if you look, we've got a lot of floodplain, but
There's a natural setback.
yeah, I don't know what it measures out to be, but.
It's not that much in visual terms. I
I
mean,
guess because
the
I'm not
depth
hearing
of that
anything
floodplain is
different
not
than
much.
from the proposal other than legal counsel.
No, I wouldn't want
Really?
setback.
We either need a setback or we need building areas.
Certainly can't hide it.
Right.
So let the full growth forest. But that can happen.
We can talk to them about like a 500-foot setback for anything
What's
over
the
500 square
setback on
feet.
that, how far back is that current event?
It's way back.
Oh, it's a few hundred
It's
yards.
all the way back to
Yeah.
the pond.
To answer your question about how you deal with potential owners, we don't want to raise barriers. So, but we also don't want to inadvertently have the donor who isn't aware of all the pitfalls to be honest.
They're trusting us.
Typically, they either come to us through an attorney, or if they don't come to us through an attorney, they never get past this point here of getting either a review of or an approval of a proposal before we have them start working with it. We certainly don't go
Yeah,
into
I
the
mean, it was
drafting
just the
stage.
lack of envelopes and then the recent business about the extinguishment paragraph that made me think with the IRS, their ruling thing,
That's why we need to-
So Shannon,
that made me think, if this is the way if this is what the specs are, who's advising them? And is it nobody, I mean, that was my trail of breadcrumbs here.
yeah, we're making suggestions, but.
No, we're early enough in the year, it's no problem to.
Yeah, sure,
work on this and
exactly.
bring it back.
So,
So there's the scale, so, I'm thinking a 500-foot setback is,
yeah, I mean, that
Hard.
floodplain, I don't know if we,
it's getting down to 250 feet or so there. So, if we did a 500 to 750-foot setback for structures over 500 square feet, I think that would address the visual concern.
It won't pass muster with the IRS, but it's
Well,
something.
not for the envelope issue, but for the scenic issue for this group.
I think the 500, I would like the 500 setback because it's consistent with the other ones that we've done.
along Jarman's Gap.
Yes.
I agree.
And other scenic
It's
roads.
consistent with what we've done.
And that's a little ridge. That's a little ridge about 500, isn't it? So,
Those are, what, 4-foot 100 units? Yes. So it's not very much. I mean, there's a little bit of ridge there, but it's.
and the creeks down there.
it's like not much.
You have enough?
I think so.
So we don't even, do we need a motion on this?
No.
Okay. Yeah, let's, you guys can communicate to others. Or thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah, it sounds like it probably gonna be with the league, some conversations about that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, no.
All right.
Thank you for the guidance on that. The other item on the agenda is the IRS safe harbor issue, and I think Richie was lead off on that.
Does everybody have been filled in on the details of what this is? What's being proposed? If nothing worse than 8 feet in a meeting and insurance thrown out. So, we don't, it's like I got a grasp. Well, I need to walk us through it.
I mean, the good thing about this, at least from my point of view, is it's a burden that falls on the donors and falls on the donors' attorneys. Now we're in a position, and I think as of the last meeting, we talked about money donation, is that I think we're in a position to be cooperative with the donors and the donors' attorneys as they come to us. At least that's the last meeting. But just by way of summary, so the United States Congress in December, they passed and the president signed. I think it's called Secure 2.0 Act. And it included some changes to how the conservation easements are going to be handled. Primarily, it was targeted towards the syndicated conservation easements. Not something that really concerns us too much. But they tacked on at the end of it. They tacked on some provisions that allow donors to amend existing easements in regards to the extinguishment clauses and also boundary line adjustments. As I said at the last meeting, I didn't think the way we handled the extinguishments, that's the extinguishment of the easements by judicial intervention for some particular reason. I can't envision what that reason would be, but they may exist. And so those would get extinguished, and then the assets would be distributed in some fashion. The way our language, at least for the time I've been involved with this, comports with what the eventually the IRS, what they put out. So I don't think we don't have issues with our easements in that respect. But again, I'll defer to the donors and their attorneys if they want to amend their easements to include what's called the safe harbor language. And the IRS has issued a notice, and it includes that safe harbor language. So if I were an attorney for a donor, and I had some concerns about, I guess, donation or deductions that still had to be made, I would want to change that language, and I would adopt the IRS's language verbatim. It just seems to be a safe best practice. And so that's as to extinguishment. I don't think our easements generate much concern over that. The other portion was boundary line adjustments, and our easements over the years have allowed for boundary line adjustments. A number of them, and I think Lee started doing it recently or within the past few years, has just said no boundary line adjustments. And so James and I, we did attend what was it, the Land Trust Alliance. They had a program on it, and they talked at length about that. There are deeds out there that just don't mention boundary line adjustments, and there was a sense of the community that that was okay. There are deeds out there that allow boundary line adjustments, and I think about the justice donation. I don't know where the status of that is in terms of relations with the IRS, but it contemplated 5 boundary line adjustments. I can't remember how many parcels. It was about 50 parcels, and it permitted it to be combined to 5 total parcels. That's one that I suspect.
But those are internal boundary line adjustments.
Yeah, and there was discussion about external and internal, and the one comment was, well, where do you get that distinction from? Because it's not in the notice. The notice talks about boundary line adjustments, and the only boundary line adjustments that's permitted is if there's a bona fide dispute over the location of it. So I'm not a tax attorney. I'll do what attorneys come to me and they want to eliminate boundary line adjustments and follow the safe harbor language.
Right.
I think that's fine. I mean, we rely on them.
So would our responsibility be here communicating with every attorney representing every donor?
Well, so I mean, that's a good question. It's one that was addressed. My view is we don't have a responsibility. The question is whether we want to undertake that. We don't have a responsibility, and we want to stay away from flip side of that is donor relations. When you just want to send out a letter and say, hey, look, be aware of this, you might want to talk to your tax consultant or your tax attorney. And so that's something for you all to consider, whether you want to do it.
Easements that we've already accepted.
Yes. Yeah, all the ones going forward, I presume, are gonna comply with this IRS language. In my dealings with them, I will suggest, if there's someone out there who doesn't, I say I will suggest this language should be included. At the end of the day, if they say we don't want to do that, that's between them, their lawyer, and the IRS.
A letter to existing easements.
Ideally, it'd be donors.
But that, wouldn't it be preferable to simply be alert to any boundary line adjustments that we would have to approve? How do you have to register? And then trigger such a letter of action?
The problem is the time frame that the safe harbor language needs to be completed. If you're allowed to make this amendment and eligible to make this amendment, you have to do it by July 24th. They have a 90-day window from the point that the IRS published their notice.
That's the safe harbor.
That's the safe harbor. After that, and there's no obligation that they make that amendment. They can, for example, in talking with me, that there might be a donor who has exhausted all their deductions and life is good, and they're past the look back period for the IRS, so that they don't have any risk. So they're not going to make it. They'll choose not to. There might just be others in a different situation. The other concern is which easements, which donations are eligible. The statute talks about effective date. The Land Trust Alliance, they were pretty uniform on the notion, and they're being conservative and saying that they're looking back 15 years, and I can't remember, the other one was like 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, it was sort of 3 was sort of the primary exposure, because that's, you know, the sort of the main audit time, I think.
Yeah,
And
so I
then
mean,
15 years being.
super conservative was 15,
You know, we had hoped it was December 29th, 2022, but.
Well, and I still think it is, but my opinion doesn't matter, and I'm comfortable with that. And frankly, I called the IRS.
I was hoping you could talk to him and see if you could convince
I
him.
called them. I suspect I'm not the first one in line to call them, and I left a lengthy message, and I haven't heard back. And I've heard that, I don't know who spoke to them, but said they weren't very. And the other view out there is that this is an IRS notice, and the opinion of the person you get on the phone may carry no weight. It may be ill-advised or ill-informed, and the notice doesn't necessarily bind a court. So those are all legitimate concerns. So my view was that, I mean, at the very least, we would be open to amendments that come to us, and so long as they comply with the safe harbor language, that we would accept those. I think, if anything, it strengthens the conservation values of what we have in this all boundary line adjustment, extinguishment. I don't think it makes it any stronger than what we have, but it has zero impact on it. So I think we can accept the amendments that are strictly comply with the safe harbor language. And so there is a motion for this body to consider that. And that would allow going for, well, it would be all donations up till today, but anything after, and really, there's nothing, I don't think we have any donations other than Lee's December 30th, and we've taken care of that. So really, effectively, would be donations before December 29th of 2022. And it would allow Jay to accept those, as long as they strictly comply with the safe harbor language.
So they
That means we don't have to convene special meetings and come back here on July 20th, and because it has to be accepted, it has to comply with certain standards. Again, it's best just to stick to the language. It has to be recorded on or before July 24th. That means that Jay would have to sign it on behalf of this body.
So you'd remove the boundary line adjustment paragraph, subparagraph, if it's in there, and then you'd.
It would, whether it cures a defect, whether it corrects an error, as they seem to call it, or it's just an amendment according to what the IRS says, but it would remove boundary line adjustments, except for those that are approved by a court, if there's a bona fide dispute of its location.
The vulnerability of an existing easement would be if a boundary line adjustment had occurred previously to this change. We're only going forward after the December last year.
Interesting, I hadn't read any opinions in courts talking about, you know, the boundary line adjustments, and I don't know, I think the other one, Morgan, UVA had boundary line adjustments.
Sherry, your concern would be that the IRS look back for 3 or 15 years for boundary line adjustments that occurred during that window.
Not that the boundary line adjustment itself would have actually occurred, but that they go fishing for the language.
They would be permitted.
If there is a deed of easement that says boundary line adjustments are permitted, that's what they would be looking
Yes.
for.
And I think
And then
there-
they would challenge the donation, perhaps.
Does this affect a scenario where their additional property would be added to an existing easement?
so I think going,
I thought it was,
well,
whole thing for last one.
it
I think-
shouldn't.
I think what a lot of us are
Because it
gonna
increases the
do
value,
is do it by amendment.
Right.
We're gonna accept an additional 15
but, I mean, if
acres.
you add it and you
by
don't erase the
amendment
boundary
and-
line, but if you erase the boundary line, then.
Well, take the scenario we just discussed in today. Let's say that landowner came back to us here and said, you know, I'd like to put the adjacent property. That would be done as a new easement with existing property lines and would not involve an amendment of the easement that.
That's
previously
my
accepted.
view. Again, I don't know what his or her attorney would say, but my view is that according to this notice, that you don't erase boundary lines. So we wouldn't amend our easement to include theirs anymore. It would just be a
Be a
new,
new
it would be a new easement.
Separate.
And I guess the disturbing thing is, so if you had 10 or 20 acres that you wanted to add to this donation, whether this body would accept a $10 or $20 or 10 or 20 acre conservation easement just because it's adjacent. I don't know that
Well, I
would.
do think people are doing it. I think we're gonna continue to accept 10 or 20 acres by amendment of the deed. We're not gonna call it a boundary line adjustment, but we're gonna do it anyway.
I have a question, because our easements are with you and the OF, we just did one last year, but I know the language was boundary line would be approved, but the other side also had to be under easement, so that was, how we shifted around and got it that way. But that's just the specific language, that you can do a boundary line adjustment as long as the other land that you're on is already under easement. Is that what is in the Albemarle as far as what it allows for boundary line?
No, I think that would be an external boundary line adjustment. And of course, the property you're adding to it has to share all the same qualities and conservation easements. But I'm wary of the language that the IRS has put forward.
Well, that's what Sharon, what you're talking about is the language that a lot of easements, VOF easements, the county easements, have had in years past. That language is going to be a problem with the IRS going forward.
I read the notice to say there are no longer boundary line adjustments allowed unless there's a bona fide dispute over the location, so is it on Jay's side of the property or mine side of the property? And a court has to make that. So the things you're suggesting, in my view, of course, and I'm y'all's attorney, not the donor's. In my opinion, you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that. That's my opinion.
But let's say we have an application for 10 acre that's adjacent to an existing ours or something else. Presumably it would waive our usual restrictions to accept 10 acres.
We've done it before, especially to fill in the gaps in the park.
So we would welcome that, it would just be a new easement.
Right, it wouldn't be an amendment to the existing, in my view. Now, if they wanted to do that and they insisted on doing that, I don't think we have to stand in the way. I don't know if there are donors out there who do it out of, genuine kindness of their heart and aren't looking for deductions. So, I mean, right, and so if that's the case, and as you say, if they have legal counsel, and they say, I've had legal counsel, and I'm not in it for the deduction, I'm in it because I want to, then we can do that. What is it, the rural preservation tracts, they don't have IRS implications. They're just, I think there's another group that doesn't have IRS implications, and that's fine.
And I feel like the nuts and bolts and sort of between the donors and their attorneys that are starting off. I don't, my perspective on this is that given a limited time frame, should we be proactive in communicating with the attorneys?
In what?
In communicating with the attorneys or the donors? Just
Yeah,
so,
well,
I don't think the attorneys I don't think it's fair to go to the attorneys, because when they recorded this bad boy, they have closed the case.
so do we?
So recording, so if I were in private practice and you wrote to me on a client I had 3 years ago, I may not be real proactive to reach out to that client because I have no duty to that client. My response might be, Jay, I don't represent this person.
Yeah.
So we have to write the donor.
I think, and all the language in the Land Trust Alliance was aimed towards the donor. They even question about, oh, I sold it to a second owner who's not the landowner, who's not the donor. And it does complicate things because the new landowner may not be the one who has a relationship with the IRS.
And taking out that language is a further restriction that some people are not going to want.
Right.
And that's the other thing.
Well, if they're done with the dealings with the IRS, it may not matter at that point.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Although
I mean, from a workload point of view, I think it might be really difficult for us to notify every donor the last 15 years. And on the Land Trust Alliance webinar thing, they made that point over and over and over that.
You did, well, if you
It's just-
undertake the duty to do it, so I notify Sherry and Mr. Emmett, but I don't notify Rose and she gets jammed, now are we in a position, have we undertaken a duty and are we negligent in not notifying Rose?
And at the very least, what's gonna happen, if you notify 300 people, 118 of them are gonna call you. And they're not gonna explain it, and you're gonna wind up giving tax advice. And it's gonna be
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that simply notifying the usual suspect lawyers in case there are any of them that aren't following this seems to me the only sort of doable thing. You don't have to really worry about Lee, and he represents most of these people these days. But if you have other usual suspects that do fewer of them and are less, who don't follow this on a monthly basis.
That's my concern is that, I feel like we're educated on this and we get this, and that some people might get a letter and it'll be just like a huge fire alarm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really careful about the advice thing. I think what I did was take something that came from either Vault, the Virginia Land Trust Alliance thing, or the national one, and just hit forward to, half a dozen people and said, FYI.
Well, which made me think.
Well, so
I
then
don't
they
know
have
about
it,
the
then they know
website.
it, and that is what it is,
So let me understand, so if I'm 13 years and they can still dig that, and I have something that says I can adjust my boundaries. It's in the easement, let's say it's in. Now this IRS says, is this safe harbor saying you can protect that? If you get it done by July, you can protect that old one? But if you don't get it protected by July 24th, then that doesn't exist. It's not going to be honored. Is that what this means?
Potentially.
Okay, so now I'm
Doesn't
sitting here
guarantee,
13
but
years and I think I have a right to, but I'll just be rudely awake. I don't have that.
No, it's not gonna change the restrictions, it's gonna change your tax level.
Well, no, for tax law, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, if you've used up all your tax benefits in
And you're
11
outside.
years,
Yeah.
if you're outside the look back, whatever that
then
might
if
be,
it was 13 years ago,
Here,
It's
Right.
a moot point.
who cares?
yes.
Right.
It sounds like we don't write the bill. And we probably don't notify the other attorneys beside the addresses.
He already knows.
Yeah.
He was pretty clear.
If you go all the way back to the beginning, you've got 116 donated easements. And spread out, you know, and they accelerate and get more frequent through the years, but you know, how far back do we go? I don't really want to write to 116 people and give them fake advice and then have to answer 115 phone calls.
Right.
Shouldn't do it.
To say the same thing.
You need to vote on it?
The US Senate, I don't, and again, we didn't get answers in the program, and I think they're being conservative. The United States Senate, they did a summary of it. They said that the section is effective for contributions made after December 29. But again, if you're a lawyer, you're not going to, that's a summary, that's not.
And you're gonna recommend that we change our draftee to.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that'll, going forward. But no, there is a motion, in the motion, I don't know if it was circulated, but it says the motion is Albemarle County Conservation Easement Authority authorizes the chair to accept on the authority's behalf amendments to any donated deed of gift of easement accepted by this authority and recorded with the clerk of the Albemarle County Circuit Court on or before this date, so long as such amendments are to satisfy Secure 2.0 Act of 2022 and to comport with Section 4 Safe Harbor deed language contained in IRS Notice 2023-30. That would be the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Not sure I find it. Great, thank you, Richie.
And then as they come in, I'll review them and just work with Jay on.
Okay.
Do you want to circulate or do anything about the revising the template deed?
So what we need to do is there are a number of other provisions that need to be made, so we need to kind of do it as a package. I think as moving forward, as each attorney comes in, if they have language that doesn't comport with it, I'll write them, said you need to
Okay.
do that.
Yeah.
Was it 5 years?
I think
Just
2019.
It feels.
It feels like we just did it because there's a lot of new VLF.
4 years ago, and Andy said it took 3 years.
He didn't change positions until that was done.
I mean, I think what some easement holders or lawyers may do is simply drop the boundary line adjustment language and be silent on it, which allows, once you're out of the, you know, the period of scrutiny for the donor and the donee to do what the damn well please.
As opposed to saying no boundary line.
Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of have two choices. I'm not sure that it's a bad thing to accept the silent one. I mean, that we haven't seen that they're going to insist upon actually seeing their language. But if they see language that isn't their language, I think that's when they hoist a red flag for sure.
I generally think the internal boundary line adjustments, as long as they're consistent with whatever developments or development rights that the parcel has, and then also exterior to bring in other property seems, as of right now, the IRS does not.
In a lot of cases, we can get rid of the internal BLAs because we've seen fewer of the easements that allow the property to be broken up into 2 or 3 pieces. But we inevitably will get 3 of those next month now that I said that.
Theoretically, if somebody's putting something under easement and wants to make boundary line adjustments, they can do it pre-easement.
That was my view, and that's a good point, is that if they're gonna do anything in that respect, do it before, do the boundary line adjustment before they come to this property.
I mean, I think it's not a bad idea when you have more than one tax map parcel and you have no division to consolidate the actual parcels. So that you don't get the kind of ambiguity that Sharon was mentioning. You know, when she said, are there 2 parcels, 40 and 45 acres permitted? You don't want to go to court and fight that. And I think Albemarle is better than most counties on this, but we're trying to consolidate them
I
when we
just think
can.
it works better with the concept of perpetuity.
Yeah.
is a very
Right,
long
exactly.
period of time.
And Sherry, I like your point of, just dropping the boundary line adjustment to language. So then it's just not even on the table.
I mean, I think either one should maybe be acceptable to us, depending on, and that's why I think they've got to have representation.
One mention from the donor's point of view is that if you don't have the word boundary line adjustments in your deed, then the IRS will pick it up. What they do is they do computer searches of the language in your deed.
Yeah, I really believe that they do word search, which is why, Scott, I always say, let's put in the building envelope somehow. Even if,
Oh, and so they,
just because literally that's what they're doing. I mean, you can see.
Envelope will be required.
no, even
I'm
better.
surprised if that wouldn't work.
Even better, a subsection or a section that says building envelopes, and then this is intentionally left blank.
But there's
So you would check your box.
there's a lot of formalism that goes on, I think, in these reviews. The IRS agents that review this are not conservation people. They don't know what in the world the actual point and substance is about these
You're
easements.
just looking for flag
And
terms.
Lee
So
mentioned that,
they're looking to disallow stuff and create more revenue, let's face it.
well, and Lee did mention that one thing, they're looking for big donations. They're looking for the big deductions. So, his comment was, though, if you're looking at you've got 100,000 left, they're not gonna flag you. They're looking for the really big stuff. But it does make me think about the James Justice
Right,
donation,
that
which I
was-
think
Sure.
is, and I don't know
Although we
the
had one
status of-
disallowed that didn't even hit the high value credit limit.
Really?
And one of the three reasons was envelopes. So that's made us a little more, aware. And,
So at some point, we need to kind of come up with a list of, what these template changes, Sounds like.
I need to do that. No, you're absolutely right. And so my view is to recreate it, to redline it and present things that I think need to be changed or updated.
Okay.
And then we'll work with, but that's on me.
This is why the IRS. Polishing their things.
Yeah, if you
You're taking back stuff.
We have to hire some people first.
Oh, they haven't hired him yet? Yeah. They come over with a sidearm, and we're gonna take back that boundary line. Or we're gonna take back all those deductions you got.
Is there any,
Voided, right? Is that what this is
Any word on
about?
justice?
Voiding? If they find that in there, they could void the whole demolition?
yes.
Yeah, see?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, they're not gonna void the,
Not the easement.
the easement doesn't go away.
Uh-huh.
The easement is still in place. It's just that you get no benefit for it.
Yeah, that's when
That's all it is.
that's why they're gonna back. Take it back.
Alright, is there any new business? Any old business? We'd like to go home. Meeting adjourned, spring evening. Thank you all very
All
much.
right.
James, you got to the first one. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
God, Richie, thank you guys for holding our hands
It's
again.
really my turn to interview. I know Wednesday.
I was trying to schedule some stuff.
Yeah, let's have a better sense for moving forward.
Nothing next week suits us. So, okay, free me up.
It's only one.
Start to finish.
I don't have a problem. It's except Thursdays, and I don't always have these on.
My book was.
Yeah, I got a survey.